Imagine a multi-million-dollar empire built completely from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And a really high-stakes deathbed succession plan, an ousted heir, and just a family that is completely fractured by allegations of betrayal, secrecy, and, like, birthright stealing.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie.
Right. Like if you're picturing, I don't know, a Wall Street boardroom or some ruthless tech startup, you are completely in the wrong neighborhood. Because we are actually looking at one of the largest religious broadcasting networks in the entire world.
Which is just, I mean, when you take that staggering level of corporate wealth and you crosswire it with deeply held religious authority and really complex family dynamics, the fallout is just spectacular.
Oh, absolutely.
It completely rewrites the rules of how legacy organizations are, supposed to operate.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We have a genuinely fascinating stack of material to unpack for you today.
We really do.
We're examining a detailed breakdown from a podcaster, Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, who recently released this video exposing the inner workings of the Daystar Television Network.
But the real goldmine here isn't just her broadcast, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We are pairing her breakdown with this massive, incredibly raw comment section from viewers who are reacting, like, in real time to this whole controversy.
And those comments they provide this incredible psychological roadmap. I mean, you're getting a front row seat to how an audience actually processes the sudden chaotic collapse of an institution that they've poured their faith into.
Yeah, and often their life savings into.
Exactly.
So our mission for you today is to explore this bizarre intersection of faith, family, and corporate fortune. We really want to map out how a very specific, unambiguous succession plan just totally dissolved into a fierce factional war.
Right.
And look at what these sources reveal about the absolute fragility of legacy when an organization's, public face doesn't match its private reality. And just as a quick reminder before we jump in, we are acting strictly as your guides through this landscape today.
Yeah, we're strictly reporting the claims, the timelines, the allegations, and the opinions that are contained in these sources.
Right, without taking any sides on the underlying theology of the family disputes.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the material.
Because it is a landscape defined by an intense dichotomy. I mean, there is the highly polished, curated spiritual product that gets broadcast to millions.
Yeah.
And then there is the messy, litigious, just cutthroat reality that's happening in the executive suites.
So let's ground this a bit by looking at how Daystar actually started. Because the contrast between the origin story and the current reality is staggering.
Oh, it's night and day.
Yeah. The sources highlight this specific anecdote involving Jonathan Lamb, who is the son of Daystar's founders, Marcus and Joni Lamb. And Jonathan visits the original Daystar television tower in Dallas, Texas.
And it's this highly nostalgic moment in the breakdown. I mean, Jonathan describes how his father, Marcus, acquired this tiny, seemingly impossible plot of land right on a riverbank.
Squeezed perfectly between the restricted airspace of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport and Dallas Love Field, which in the broadcasting world, you do not just casually build a massive broadcast tower in the middle of heavily regulated overlapping flight paths.
No, it's practically impossible.
Right, but Marcus somehow secured this specific sliver of land, built the tower, and it essentially launched the entire network.
Right.
So in the source material, this is framed as this miraculous unified beginning, the pure vision of a founder.
And that pure vision is exactly what makes the end of Marcus Lamb's life so incredibly jarring to read about.
Yeah.
The transcript details this scene on his deathbed that completely shatters that whole founding mythos of unity.
Okay, so let's get into that. According to the podcaster, Marcus is on his deathbed, and he makes a highly specific, very calculated move. Like, he doesn't just weakly announce his plans to whoever happens to be standing in the room.
Right, it wasn't casual at all.
No. He reportedly has someone call a woman named Denise Boggs, and he ensures this call is made using his daughter Rachel's phone.
Which is a huge detail.
Right. And on this call, he explicitly states his final directive, which is that his son, Jonathan, is to be the head of Daystar.
But, and the podcaster really emphasizes this, what Marcus allegedly omitted is just as critical as what he said.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in this deathbed directive, Marcus pointedly leaves out two major figures from the leadership plan. His wife, Joni Lamb, and his son-in-law, Joshua Brown.
He excludes them entirely.
Completely leaves them out.
Wait, let's look at the mechanics of this, because from a purely business standpoint, this is wild to me.
Oh, yeah.
If you have the founder of a massive corporate enterprise explicitly laying out a succession plan on his deathbed, literally, deliberately cutting out his spouse and another executive,
Yeah.
How on earth do the exact people he excluded end up seizing total control of the empire?
That is literally the multi-million-dollar question. And the answer lies in, well, a fundamental misunderstanding of how nonprofit governance actually works.
Okay, unpack that.
So the commenters treat Daystar like a family heirloom, like a watch that a father can just simply bequeath to his son.
Right, like passing down the family farm.
Exactly. But it's not a farm, it's a massive corporate entity. In a standard family business, a deathbed verbal wish might trigger a huge probate battle over shares and ownership. But Daystar is a tax-exempt religious nonprofit.
Oh, so there are no shares.
There are no shares to inherit.
So his verbal wishes mean absolutely nothing against the corporate bylaws.
Precisely. You have this violent clash between perceived spiritual authority, which is the dying patriarch's blessing, and actual legal corporate authority.
Right.
I mean, Joni Lamb was the co-founder. She already sat on the board. She already possessed immense structural and operational power within the organization.
So she had the keys to the castle already.
Exactly. Even if Marcus desperately wanted Jonathan to take over, the legal realities of corporate board control, they just don't bend to the verbal directives of a dying founder. So the sources outline a scenario where Joni essentially leveraged her existing operational control to completely override Marcus's wishes. She effectively utilized corporate mechanics to execute a total takeover.
And she didn't just take over, right? She cleaned house.
Oh, she absolutely did.
Which brings us to the catalyst that actually shattered the family in the first place. And it centers entirely around Joni Lamb's new relationship and subsequent marriage to a man named Doug Weiss.
Right, a figure that the commenters derisively refer to as Doug the Pug.
Yes, the audience in the comment section is vehemently opposed to this union. Like, they tear it apart.
They really do. And the sources describe this marriage as the actual wedge that drove Jonathan out.
Right, because Jonathan, operating on his interpretation of biblical principles, absolutely refused to endorse his mother's marriage to Doug.
Yeah.
The podcaster and the viewers describe it as an unbiblical union, and some are openly labeling it an adulterous affair.
And Jonathan's refusal to publicly validate the marriage, that was the breaking point. The sources describe this critical meeting with a figure named Jimmy Evans, where Joni essentially demands that Jonathan fall in line and support the new regime.
And when Jonathan refuses.
That very corporate machinery we just talked about is immediately weaponized against him.
Right, because the podcaster names specific network executives here. Shannon Kelly and Tom Callender. And they were allegedly utilized by Joni to execute a corporate purge. They officially fired Jonathan and his wife, Susie. But they don't just, hand them a cardboard box and walk them to the elevator. They issue an ultimatum.
A huge ultimatum.
Jonathan must sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, or he loses his seat on the board of directors entirely.
Which is a brutal corporate tactic.
Hold on, though, because I need to look at this through the lens of a typical listener who maybe works in the corporate world.
Sure.
Executives are ousted every single day.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Right. Board members are forced into early retirement. NDAs are standard operating procedure at almost every Fortune 500 company on the planet. So why are the podcaster and this massive comment section treating a standard executive firing like a profound spiritual crime?
It comes down to the psychological contract between the organization and its funders. Think about your own workplace or like a company you buy products from.
Okay.
If you buy a smartphone, your contract with that tech company is purely transactional. You don't care if they use NDAs in their HR department, just as long as the phone works.
Right. Yeah, I don't care about Apple's HR policies.
Exactly. But the people watching Daystar believe they are funding a ministry. They believe they are supporting a spiritual entity that operates on biblical principles of transparency, grace, divine guidance.
So they aren't buying a product. They are tithing to a mission.
Exactly. They expect the organization to operate completely above the fray. So when a tax-exempt religious nonprofit utilizes the exact same cold, suppressive tools of white-collar corporate America like leveraged firings, legal threats, NDAs, it violently breaks that psychological contract.
Oh, I see.
The viewers feel personally betrayed. They realize the institution they thought was divinely guided is actually acting like a ruthless corporate syndicate just protecting its brand liability.
So firing Jonathan isn't just an HR move. To the audience, it's the excommunication of the rightful heir simply because he refused to compromise his morals.
Right. And the aftermath of that firing is where the timeline in the sources turns incredibly dark. And it's where the audience's reaction becomes intensely theological.
Yeah, this part of the breakdown is chilling. According to the podcaster, during the peak of this factional clash over the marriage and the network's direction, Joni Lamb delivers this stark, heavy warning to her son.
Yeah.
She reportedly tells Jonathan, "Let God judge between me and you. I can promise you that he will judge between me and you."
I mean, to issue a statement like that to your own child,
Right.
especially within a community that strongly believes in active divine intervention, that is an immense thing to say.
It's a massive statement. And immediately following this interaction, the sources place the timeline around late 2023 or early 2024. Joni Lamb is diagnosed with terminal metastatic breast cancer, a disease that ultimately took her life.
And how this highly religious audience processed that specific sequence of events, that is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire comment section.
Yeah, because the comment section effectively became a theological tribunal. A vast majority of the viewers, along with the podcaster herself, drew an absolute direct line between Joni's words to her son and her cancer diagnosis. They did not view this as just a tragic biological reality. They viewed the terminal cancer as an instantaneous judgment from God, a direct punishment for her treatment of Jonathan and her marriage to Doug Weiss.
And this creates a profound tension in the source material, because you have one side fiercely citing scripture, utterly convinced she died in a state of sin and rebellion.
Right.
Yeah.
They argue that because she never publicly reinstated Jonathan to the network, well, that proves she never truly repented for the corporate purge.
But the podcaster also shares a letter she received that pushes back on this rigid view. Right?
Yes.
The letter asks a very simple, very heavy question. Is anything too hard for God? Which introduces this concept of last-minute grace. The idea that even in her final private moments away from the boardroom and the broadcast cameras, she could have experienced true deathbed repentance.
Right. There's also a contested claim brought up by a figure named Kenyon, who suggested that Joni actually finished well in her final days.
Though the comment section aggressively rejects that narrative.
They completely reject it.
You know, I read through these reactions and I have to ask about the human element here. The audience is effectively weaponizing a terrible terminal disease.
Yeah.
They are using metastatic breast cancer as definitive proof of theological judgment. Isn't it incredibly dangerous to play this game of reading the tea leaves of someone's medical chart?
Oh, it's incredibly dangerous. But from a psychological standpoint, it's highly predictable.
How so?
Look at the power dynamics at play. These viewers have absolutely zero leverage against the corporate machinery of a multi-million-dollar broadcasting network. They can't vote in board meetings. They can't block an NDA.
They just watch the TV?
Exactly. So when powerless communities witness what they perceive as a massive injustice like an unrighteous corporate takeover, and they realize earthly systems won't fix it, they look for the universe to balance the scales.
So they project their need for justice onto a real-world tragedy.
They do. The audience saw a corporate coup they couldn't stop. So when the architect of that coup falls fatally ill, it provides a narrative resolution that the legal system and the boardroom denied them.
Wow.
They need a framework where actions have immediate cosmic consequences, because the earthly consequences are nowhere to be found.
That makes total sense. Which transitions us perfectly into the current earthly reality of Daystar. Because the network is still broadcasting, and the consequences of this succession battle are actively playing out in the executive suites right now.
Yeah, the aftermath of Joni's passing has solidified a new leadership structure, and the sources are heavily scrutinizing it.
The podcaster has a very specific term for the current leadership running the network. She calls them the three-headed dragon.
Right.
This triad consists of Arnold Torres, Steve Wilhite, who famously dismissed the podcaster as a clickbait cockroach, and Rachel Lamb Brown.
Rachel being the sister who aligned with her mother during the initial family fracture.
Yes, and the sources dive deeply into the alleged motivations for that alliance. Because the podcaster claims Rachel sided with Joni over goodies.
Goodies?
Yeah, we're talking about massive, tangible corporate perks.
Yeah.
The sources allege they bonded over multiple luxury homes and a $100,000 honeymoon, all entirely funded by the network's coffers. Meanwhile, the third sister, Rebecca, is largely discussed in the comments through the lens of her silence. Viewers are immensely frustrated that she chose not to step into the fray and stand up for Jonathan.
The vitriol aimed at this new leadership team is intense. I mean, the podcaster and the commenters actively accuse them of being birthright-stealing cockroaches, basically flipping Wilhide's insult right back on the executives.
Yeah. There's also this looming unresolved element regarding Rachel's husband, Joshua Brown. Remember, he was one of the two people Marcus Lamb allegedly explicitly excluded from leadership on his deathbed.
That's right.
So the commenters are highly suspicious of his current influence behind the scenes. They view him as this shadow operator who just sidestepped the founder's final wishes.
And this hyper-focus on salaries and honeymoons and executive perks, it feeds into a much broader, overarching critique that the podcaster levels against the network's entire business model.
Yeah, she inextricably links Daystar's corporate behavior to the prosperity gospel.
Exactly. The structural comparison they make here is just fascinating. The podcaster and the commenters essentially compare Daystar's financial model to a multi-level marketing scheme, an MLM.
Right.
They argue that the top-tier personalities, this three-headed dragon, they accumulate staggering wealth. They get the sprawling mansions, the private flights, the massive salaries.
But the mechanism funding this lifestyle is deeply unbalanced.
Very.
The sources point straight to the vulnerable donor base. The podcaster literally states it's the grandmas watching on television, mailing in their fixed income checks who are footing the bill for these satellites and mega mansions.
It's quite the accusation.
And here is the massive contradiction that jumps out at me. We are describing a spiritual influencer economy. The personalities at the top sell a specific lifestyle and a promise of blessing. But if the audience, at least the massive audience generating this comment section, if they know it's an MLM-style grift, why hasn't the network collapsed?
Right.
Why does the money keep flowing into the vault?
Because you are looking at two entirely different audiences living in two entirely different information ecosystems.
Okay, what do you mean?
This is the brilliant, if highly cynical reality of legacy broadcast empires. The institution's financial survival does not rely on the digitally savvy people who are leaving thousands of comments on a YouTube expose.
Oh.
It relies on isolated, deeply faithful donors who are completely walled off from the digital drama.
So the grandmas aren't watching Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson's deep dives on their iPads.
No, they aren't. They are watching a highly polished, carefully curated, closed-loop television broadcast. And that broadcast tells them their donations are saving souls and funding a pure ministry.
Wow.
There is a severe, almost impenetrable disconnect between the litigious factional warfare happening in the boardroom and the pristine spiritual product being beamed into living rooms.
Right.
The YouTube commenters know the ugly truth, but the broader, older donor base, the actual financial lifeblood of the network, they are kept entirely in the dark.
It's the ultimate walled garden. Like, as long as you own the broadcast tower, you own the reality.
Exactly.
Whatever narrative goes out over those airwaves is the only truth that matters to the core donors.
And that fundamentally is why the corporate fight for control of the network was so utterly ruthless. If you control the board, you control the broadcast tower.
Right.
You control the tower, you control the reality for millions of donors. And if you control their reality, you control the revenue.
Man, this breakdown is a masterclass in organizational mechanics. For you listening, the core takeaway here is to really look beyond the soapy family drama. What we are really examining is what happens when the pure, original vision of an institution violently collides with human flaws, immense wealth, and just the cold, unyielding mechanics of corporate succession.
Yeah.
It challenges you to look closely at the invisible structures, the NDAs, the bylaws, the executive maneuverings that operate quietly behind the media and the institutions you place your absolute trust in.
It completely strips away the shiny veneer of the broadcast and forces you to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Which is?
Where exactly does the ministry end and where does the corporation begin?
That is the question. And I actually want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We've talked a lot about the walled garden of the television broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
But networks like Daystar rely on decades of archived, content classic sermons, old interviews, foundational programming that features the entire family.
Right, their whole back catalog.
Exactly. So if a brand is built entirely on the concept of an unshakable, unified family that is anointed by faith, what does the network do with its own digital ghost?
Oh.
How does an empire manage thousands of hours of tape featuring an ousted son or an excluded founder? Do you erase them from the archives to protect the new regime? Or do you keep broadcasting their faces just to keep the donation checks coming in?
That's a huge dilemma.
In an era where everything is recorded, can you ever truly purge a family member from a legacy they helped build?
It's a fascinating problem. Because when the primary commodity you sell is pure trust, rewriting your own history is a very, very dangerous gamble.
It really is. Well, something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.